Traveling with guns. Is it frightening? Is it possible? Of course, it's possible. Is it logical and practical? And should you be proficient at doing so? Well, yes. As a matter of fact, you should. And there are a lot of reasons why. But the simplest one is, if you're not willing to fly with your firearms, you're going to limit the potential adventures that you as a hunter can take, not just in the United States, but around the world. And so it's a skill that you should learn. You don't really have to perfect it, right? It takes a lot of flying to perfect flying with firearms, and since regulations change on occasion, you have to be adaptable. That's the skill that you want to learn and polish, is the ability to be adaptable, change with new regulations, new people at different airports and locations, and just learn to work with it, right? As long as you're flexible and you're able to maintain a polite and cheerful demeanor, almost any situation that you can encounter while traveling with firearms can be overcome, as long as it's not something that you've totally whiffed overseas where you require some kind of a transport, import, export type license, and you don't have it, right? That can be a little more problematic, but do your due diligence, you'll be fine. So the takeaway from that little spiel is traveling with guns is something that you should not be afraid of, okay? Now we're going to define this task, this traveling with firearms issue here in just a minute. But before we do that, I would like to just give a shout out to the several Patreon members of the Backcountry Hunting Podcast that have written in and requested coverage on this topic. Since there were several, I'm not going to throw out any individual names, but you know who you are, and I appreciate you. I appreciate the continued support on Patreon. Since I'm on that subject, folks, Patreon is a simple subscription type service where you can sign up as a member. Now, you can become a free member, but you don't really get access to the bonus material. It just is what it is, right? I try and publish an open, free, and public post now and then, but every week, as long as I'm doing my part, not snowed under, either with activities with the family or on assignment somewhere that's hard to get service, I publish bonus content on patreon.com/backcountry. And for those of you that want to subscribe, there's actually, if I do say so myself, some pretty cool stuff that pops up there from time to time. More to the point, as a member of Patreon and a subscriber, you can offer a little bit of financial support to the podcast. And you may not think that amounts to much, but my friends, it makes such a tremendous difference in helping me to justify the time that it takes to continue to create this podcast. I'm a one-man show. I don't have any employees that help with outlining, recording, editing, and publishing and maintaining the podcast. It's all me. And it does take a lot of time. It's a labor of love. It's one of my favorite parts of my daily and weekly routines. But, I do this sort of thing for a living. Primarily, I'm a writer, but the ability to make a few bucks to justify the time I spend doing, this fun stuff on the podcast makes such a huge, huge difference. And our Patreon members are the primary source of those dollars. So thank you, a tremendous thank you to all of those of you that are already on board. I just can't thank you enough. If you're interested, in case you're interested, I'll put a link down in the show notes of this episode, but you can just Google patreon.com/backcountry. It'll take you to the site where you can sign up if you're interested. And now back to the topic at hand here. Traveling with guns. We got to define that problem, right? Anytime you're setting out to provide a solution or solve some kind of a challenge, you need to define it first. So I've got some handy dandy notes here that I'm going to consult as I was thinking through this upcoming topic. I wanted to try and put myself in the shoes of those who had never traveled before. And I will throw out one name there. My good friend Evan Sambita, custom knife maker with Sambita Custom Knives, is attending our elk hunting boot camp this month, here in a couple weeks. And he's called me a couple times with questions because although he has hunted from Texas to the tip of Idaho, he's always driven. He's never flown with a firearm. And he was a little bit, not concerned, but just unsure about the process. And he wanted to make sure he got it right. So, uncertainty. This is one of the biggest reasons that people balk at flying with firearms. They just don't know what to expect and how to prepare for it. Another is that there are a lot of different airlines, and as a result, there are a lot of different airline regulations, right? They're not, or at least they're not held to a standard, and they have not communicated very well their individual standards and regulations for traveling with firearms. But there are some federal guidelines that keep them within certain lanes on that highway, if that makes sense. And so, although that's it can be a daunting prospect. Oh gosh, how do I know what United needs compared to Delta? Well, it's not that hard, and we'll go over that. Another is, this one's kind of fun, suspicion of agents, records, scrutiny. Is your firearm going to be registered? Is that a problem? I mean, does some kind of government agency get involved? And so folks that are private by nature, perhaps, dare I use the word, tongue-in-cheek for us backcountry hunters, but conspiracy theorists, right? Or preppers, that type, can balk at any type of public appearance with their firearm. And that, my friends, also really isn't an issue, especially within the United States. Traveling internationally, yeah, sometimes, well, in fact, always, there will be a record of your firearm, the serial number and so forth, and that's fine. Okay, so what about this one? Worried about damage or loss. This is, I think, becoming less and less of an issue as various electronic evolutions make it easier for airlines to track your firearms and your ammunition. Once you've handed it over to them, they're responsible for that. And although they do record in their system when they print the luggage tag that this is a firearms case, they don't take any serial numbers, anything else like that, but they do know that they are now responsible for that firearm, and they protect them pretty carefully. There's some things that you can do as well to, from a personal standpoint, to protect your firearm, whether it's getting a really good hard case to fly with it in, or doing something like putting air tags inside each case so that you can track it even if the luggage people lose it. Okay, how about this one? Unsure how to pack. How do I basically put my rifle in a case that's supposed to act as luggage and then keep it safe while it flies, right? So we're going to go over that as it pertains to rifles, shotguns, handguns, and ammunition. And how about suppressors? Well, we'll just talk about that one right now. Suppressors are legal to fly with as long as you travel to a state that, or a country internationally, right, where they're fully legal. We do have, I think it's 8 states still in the United States that don't allow suppressors. Don't fly there with one. It's just common sense, right? You can look up that map very easily. When you travel with a suppressor, I recommend just keeping a digital copy of your tax stamp, the front page, of your paperwork on your phone, and a half size, print it at 50% size, laminate it, and keep it in your gun case. That way, if you're questioned by a law enforcement officer, you have the documentation right there with you. Fully legal, easy, not a problem. And just for those who are wondering, if you are asked to provide legal documentation for a suppressor, you have 24 hours to provide that. They may not tell you that, but you can tell them that. And then even if you're somewhere with your suppressor, no documentation, you can usually find somebody to dig out your paperwork out of the file cabinet or your safe and take a photocopy and send it to you. Take them in black and white, by the way. The ATF doesn't like it when you create full color, full size photocopies of your tax stamp and paperwork. They consider that walking a little too close to the line of forgery. So just do them at half size, black and white, and you're good to go. Okay, let's now break these definitions down one at a time and see if we can't make this flying seem as easy as it actually is in real life. So the uncertainty, this was our first subcategory, right? Uncertainty about flying with guns. This usually stems from folks that have never done it, right? The first time you try anything, it can be a bit, you can be concerned about it, and that's fine. After you've done it once or twice, you're going to realize, actually, this is pretty simple stuff, right? So another uncertainty is, what if I break a regulation? Well, it's actually pretty hard to break a regulation of flying with firearms. When you show up at the ticket counter in the airport, you just say, look, I'm traveling with a firearms case. Can you walk me through the appropriate process to check it in? And anywhere in the United States, they're typically pretty well versed. If you get the feeling that the agent doesn't deal with that on a regular basis, be upfront with them, be candid with them. Just say, hey, I can tell you may be a little uncomfortable with this. Do you mind if we call in your supervisor to help out with this? Because somebody there will know the laws. Now, folks who have encountered a really snooty and non-helpful agent often will take to printing off the actual airline's regulations. Let's say you're flying with, I don't know, Southwest or American or whoever. They just go online, print off the regulations, and they have them with them so that when that agent starts humming and hawing and acting a little weird, they just say, here, I've printed these off in case you have any questions. So let's just move forward, right? The key is to be polite and respectful, and they usually will respond that way. And just to set your concerns at rest about encountering ignorant agents that don't want to be helpful, I think in 20 years of flying very regularly with firearms, I'm talking usually a half dozen to a dozen times a year, I've encountered maybe 3 that were intentionally ignorant about it. I've encountered a few more that were just uninformed and maybe a little anxious because they wanted to get it right too. Always were helpful, and whether I showed them some paperwork or we just called in their superior agent, it was never a problem. So that's really, breaking a regulation isn't an issue unless you try to fly with, let's say, a highly controlled firearm, fully automatic firearm, and so forth. Those are out of my realm of expertise. I don't have any of those. So, it's something I'm not familiar with. It can be done, I'm sure, but you probably have to file some previous paperwork. More likely, it's very practical, common sense stuff. You're not allowed to fly with ammunition loaded in your firearm. Makes good sense, right? So, for crying out loud, just check it. Make sure it's not loaded before you head into the airport. And, I confess, once I was doing paperwork, you usually sign a little card, a little orange or white card or something that just states that the gun is unloaded. The agents don't check it. They don't even want to see it usually. You sign the card on their desk, you crack open the end of your gun case, slide it in there, put the locks back on, and you're good to go. But I was doing this at one point, and in the back of my mind, something said, that rifle's loaded. And I thought through for a minute, and I couldn't remember unloading it. And it was a rifle I typically keep loaded for predator hunting around home. So I opened the case and just casually cracked the bolt. And sure enough, this has been years ago, like 15 years ago, I could see the tips of bullets in that box magazine. So what did I do? I just discreetly and casually popped the floor plate, it's hinged floor plate rifle, let those cartridges spill into my hand, and then I put them in my back pocket. Not obviously, but not like I was trying to hide anything. And then as I left after checking the gun in to go through security, I just found a local garbage and dropped them in there. What else can you do, right? Anyway, just hold your cool if you do anything like that. But my friends, be smarter than I was. don't leave your firearm loaded. And if you're traveling with multiple ones, especially handguns, just check them multiple times before you go through. Again, it's just practical common sense. If you're a little smarter than me, you won't do that. Of course, part of it's when you travel 100 times with the firearm, you're probably going to screw that up at least once, right? Moving on. What if my firearm gets lost? I've never had one full-on get lost. I have had cases get delayed, which is usually a big concern for the airline because, again, they know they're responsible for it. So they make a big effort. You know, if some luggage doesn't make it on the plane, they try and leave that to duffel bags and stuff. They try and get all the gun cases on. The one time it happened in sort of recent years was 2-3 years ago, going into Kodiak, Alaska. Several gun cases didn't make it onto the small, I mean, it's a commercial flight, but it wasn't a big commercial flight. They came in the next morning, no problem, but you just file a claim with the baggage office, and if it's just late, they say, well, it's coming in on the next plane in 3 hours or whatever. Usually they're liable or responsible for delivering that delayed case to your residence, your hotel if you're staying somewhere. So you can just give them your address and it'll show up there usually. Same thing goes for duffel bag with your ammunition in, because although in the United States it's fully legal to pack ammunition in with your rifle as long as it's not loaded in the rifle, a lot of people still choose, if you're taking a rifle case plus a big duffel, just put the boxes of ammo in your duffel. Declare it, so tell the agent, hey, there's ammunition in here. Airlines like it to be in factory original boxes, and so I'll generally just say it's factory, or it's ammunition in original factory boxes, and it's in my duffel bag. If it's in the case, I will say, yeah, I have some ammunition stored in there with the firearm, but it's not loaded in the firearm. Pretty simple, just simple statements, get you through without fuss. Here's a big one. What type of case is best? A lot of people ask me this. I've had friends that really like the aluminum hard cases, and I had one early on for a little while, but I got away from that pretty quickly because if that aluminum gun case takes a hard fall or hard knock, it can spring the hinges, it can dent it, it can bend the steel rod that slides through to secure the latches. There are things that can happen to an aluminum gun case that makes it really hard to use, where it just doesn't open and shut easily. A high impact plastic gun case like a Pelican or any of the other high quality brands is now my preference. And in fact, I've gone from using a pretty big gun case to a pretty small gun case. I like the smallest one that I can use and still get everything in that I need. I've got one right here on the table in front of me. This is a Pelican Storm case, and the model is the small I, capital M, so IM 3410, 3410, and I believe that's a length and size designation. This one is too small to fit 2 guns in, according to most people. I'll turn it up here on my table for those of you watching on YouTube, but it's got airlocks so it doesn't bulge or cave in when you're going up to 35,000 feet in an airplane. It's got 5 really good latches along the front. It's got 4 locking points. It's a great case, and I have never had trouble fitting 2 rifles in, or a rifle and a shotgun. Just never been an issue. So I'm not one that believes you need a great big gun case. I like traveling with the smallest hard case I can, because once you get to your destination, that is just a big bulky item that's getting in the way. And even traveling to it, like let's say there's 4 of you in an SUV, getting 4 big hard-sided gun cases in turns it in, what should be a relaxing trip to your hunt or your shooting match or whatever into a game of Tetris, right? We're going to go over how to pack your firearm in that case here in a little bit. Talked about, can you put your ammo in the same case? Yeah, just keep it in factory boxes. I prefer actual like 20 count ammo boxes like you'd buy at the store, but I have friends that fly with the 50 round reloading boxes, and they work. You tell people that is a factory-made box 4 ammunition, and usually they'll let it slide, even though it doesn't look like something you'd buy ammo off the shelf for, right? Anyway, finally, what kind of locks do I need? We'll probably go over this again here in a minute when I talk about specifically how to load your case, but I really like a lock that has 3 features. It's TSA accessible, so that the agents can open your gun case and examine the contents if you're not there. This saves you a lot of waiting around. Generally, if you have a TSA accessible lock on your gun case, you can just drop it off at the inspection location and walk away. And if they find something they don't like, they'll call you. If it's a standard padlock or combination lock that's not TSA accessible, you usually have to wait until they've had a chance to x-ray it, and if they want to open it up and examine the contents, then they'll give you, the thumbs up to proceed. The TSA accessible just does away with that. There are people that have some moral conundrums about that, right? They don't want anybody able to access that without them present. And that's fine if that's how you feel. The next characteristic I like in a lock is I like a combination rather than a keyed padlock, because on multiple occasions I have misplaced my keys. Whether it's at the end of a hunt and you're just frazzled and it just somehow got lost, or on your way out and somehow you or your buddy has misplaced the key that your gun or your shared firearms are in. If you're traveling together, one of you can declare and take both rifles, whatever. And we've had to find, even sometimes go out of the airport to get bolt cutters to get that case open so that the TSA could inspect it. It is a royal pain. So get yourself a good combination lock, actually a set of them. You need a lock in every locking point on your case, according to most airlines these days. And it's smart. 1 or 2 can fail and the case can come out or come open, and gear, or even I've seen rifle barrels sticking out of half-open cases, whatever. You don't want that. When you set your padlock combination, don't do 30-06. I have opened a number of padlocks that I had no idea what the combination was, but it's on a gun case. You go there, you dial in 30-06, 9 times out of 10 it'll open. If you gotta pick a cartridge, do something a little more unique. Something you remember, but if it's numbers, of course. The other thing you can do is, if it's words, you can put in a word like buck, B-U-C-K, B-U-L-L if you're an elk hunter or whatever. Something that's easy to remember, but is a little bit unique to you. The third characteristic I like is something that's real visible. For years I hunted with just black or the pewter gray or whatever padlocks, and man, when they get misplaced in a pile of gear and you're trying to get everything sorted out and ready to fly home with, it is sure nice to have a brightly colored padlock. You can get them in red or blue or orange, whatever. I kind of like orange myself just because, well, it's one of our podcast colors and I like it. Let's move on. Excuse me. Okay, let's next address different airline regulations that you can encounter. Now, some of the simple stuff that really doesn't matter is how, for instance, one airline may say as long as you have 2 locks in your gun case, you're good to go, where another, we're talking U.S. Airlines, may say, no, you've got to have a lock on every locking point that case offers, whether it's 2 or 6, right? Have a lock in every point. I've just gone to doing that now anyway because it does 2 things. It prevents any questions, and it really helps hold your case secure. How about more complex issues such as international regulations? Here's where correspondence with your outfitter, because generally when you go internationally, you're not going DIY. Sometimes you can, like in New Zealand or whatever, but talk with an outfitter, even if you're not going with an outfitter. Talk with one at a show, the DSC show, or any kind of a good hunting show, and say, what are the specific regulations to traveling to your country with a firearm? And some of them will say it's a cinch. You show up, you take your firearm to the little police office in the airline. This is how Namibia is. Fill out the paperwork, and off you go with it. Just don't lose your permit, right? It'll be fine. That's one reason I love traveling to Namibia in Africa, because it's still so straightforward and simple. On the other hand, if you go somewhere like New Zealand or Argentina, plan on several hours of effort and just jumping through one hoop after another to get your firearm permits all properly wrapped up so that you can then go hunting. It's gotten pretty challenging in countries like that. There are some that require you to file your paperwork significantly in advance. Most European countries are like that. If you're going to England or Spain or anywhere like that, you better look up the regulations, again, just a Google search, and then go through all those steps. It's complex, but if you have a firearm that you really want to hunt with in a certain foreign country, it's worth it. Otherwise, just rent or borrow one when you get there. And that's pretty much all there is to it. It is helpful to travel with somebody that's experienced in this case. You know, I typically like traveling with my friend Austin Brown, because he is really good at research when it comes to, specific country-specific regulations. And he's so experienced that nothing ruffles his feathers anymore. So it's pretty easy to get through situations like this. I did make a mistake in 2011, so a long time ago, where I traveled to Sweden for a moose hunt. Never saw a moose in front of me while we were hunting. I helped haul out a few. Great experience. Got to experience the local culture and see some wonderful, beautiful country. Did a tour of the Norma ammunition plant. Fantastic. Anyway, I had flown with a takedown rifle in a very short case. It was only about 2.5 feet long. Hard-sided Pelican case. It was tan rather than your usual gun case black, right? I like colored gun cases. Just makes them easier to pick yours out of the pile. At any rate, when I went to check in, we drove across the border to Oslo, Norway, which is where I'd flown in as well. Went to check in there for my return flight. And she looked at my case and said, "Are you traveling with a firearm, sir?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "You don't have a transfer permit through Heathrow." This is Heathrow, England, right? And I said, "I candidly wasn't aware I needed one." And she said, "Oh, yes. In fact, you have to file for that no less than 3 days in advance." Things have probably changed, but that's how it was in 2011. And they're pretty rigorous about that. And I said, "Gosh, I came through and didn't even know it." She said, "Well, your firearms case is compact, and they probably just checked it through and didn't even look at it. You're very fortunate, because they potentially could have arrested you." Now, this has been a while ago, right? And sometimes mistakes are made, but thankfully, the airline there was fantastic. The agents were supremely professional and courteous and downright kind about my predicament, right? I'm trying to get home now, and I don't have the paperwork to do so properly. And so, no problem at all. She rerouted me through a different airport, and I got home, an airport through a country that didn't require transfer paperwork of your firearm, and I got home no problem. Anyway, just worth a heads up. International travel is more complex than flying domestically. Once you've flown domestically a bunch, the international travel is just more like, here we go with all the red tape, right? You're not really afraid or concerned, but you're diligent, especially once you screwed up once or twice like me, right? You're diligent about getting everything right so that it's a seamless transfer. Okay, here's something that's worth talking about. That's just your demeanor as you approach. I touched on this earlier, but it really is worth being confident, and you get confidence by being well-researched, right? Well-informed, and being super polite, and just trusting that it will go through properly when you approach the check-in counter. Again, we're talking more, international as well, but this, for most of us who will only travel domestically, this is a very applicable. American airline agents, and my apologies to any of those of you listening or viewing that are airline agents, but as a whole, do not have nearly as polite and helpful a demeanor as international agents. Typically, they are probably overworked and they have little to no patience left for complex matters. And if you approach with a firearm, you're bordering on a complex matter, right? You're just a little more complex than the average person. And if you then get flustered, it frustrates them. So don't do that. Just be confident, polite, respectful, and everything will go smoothly. Bypass the check-in kiosks when you approach. If you're in a big airport and there are all these little, self-check-in, self-print your boarding pass kind of kiosks, just go right past them, because if you try and check in, it'll say, do you have anything to declare, such as alcohol, firearms, etc. You click yes, and they say, we can't help you. Go to the live ticket agent. So just go straight to the live ticket agent. In fact, a lot of airlines have a policy where hunters or shooters traveling with firearms get priority treatment. So if you go to the nice person that's generally kind of directing traffic, helping people with trouble on the kiosks, and just say, hey, I'm traveling with a firearm. Where would you like me to check in? They'll often put you straight into the priority lane, which is awesome because it's shorter, and generally they have their most professional, most experienced agents working the priority lanes. So as you then approach, she or he will have noticed that you have a firearms case. They'll usually smile and say, traveling with firearms today, sir or ma'am? And you say, yes, I am. And within a minute or two, you're checking in, no problems. It works really well. Even if you don't go to priority, though, it's pretty smooth. But you'll have to deal with a human. Machines can't check in as yet, firearms legally. So, I took some notes here. Again, just said, and this is especially pertinent if this is your very first time ever traveling with a firearm. Be cheerful, not nervous. Ask the agent to walk you through the process. Be humble, let them know you want to get it right. That's helping them, right? 9 out of 10 are going to be awesome. If you get a Grinch, just suffer through it with a smile. And if you get somebody, as I mentioned earlier, that's clearly inept, be really polite, but ask if you can see their supervisor. Sometimes that's a relief to them too. Okay, once you've done that, you've signed your little card, orange, white card, whatever, cracked your gun case, put it in there. They're going to have you weigh your case. I like to have my gun case loaded with other gear, my hunting knife, bipod, shooting sticks, anything like that, right up to 49 pounds. This is usually a 2 firearm load, right? And then you just check it straight in. If you don't have TSA accessible locks, you'll wait for 15 minutes while it goes through their x-ray and their examinations, and they'll say you're good to go. On the other end, you just go out. You usually will wait at the baggage carousel to get your duffel bag, assuming you're traveling with one, and then go over to the airline baggage office, which is the same place you make a claim if your bags are delayed, right? You just say, hey, I've got a firearm case I'm traveling with. Have those come off the plane yet? And they'll say, yeah, they're right here, or we're just waiting on them. Hang out for a sec. You'll show them typically your ID, driver's license, or if you're traveling internationally, a passport, so that they can confirm that you are indeed the one on the ticket on that gun case, right? And then off you go. In the U.S., you just head right out, right? Go get your rental car, jump in the truck with your friend that's picking you up, whatever the case is. If you're traveling internationally, then you will probably be directed to the police office, where either an officer will carry your firearm and accompany you to the police office, or the guns will just already be there, and you'll go and you'll sign it into their book. They'll make sure that your paperwork is issued correctly, tell you not to lose it for the duration of your visit, and then you take your firearm and go. All right, what about the suspicious among us? What if you are that conspiracy theorist or prepper, or maybe you just don't trust people that keep records, right? Well, let's keep this pretty simple. Traveling domestically, don't even worry about it, because nobody's going to keep records. If you travel internationally, you're darn right. You will be issued a firearm with where they've rigorously checked the model, the serial number, and the caliber. So make sure you get those things right. Your firearm will, your firearm permit will sometimes expire at the end of your trip. Sometimes it'll be good for 6 months. Sometimes it'll be good for longer, but that's rare. Now, one other thing that you need to know about traveling with firearms internationally, there's a U.S. requirement that when you come back into the country, you have a form that proves that that is your firearm and you took it with you out of the country. They don't want any, shall we say, firearms being smuggled into the country, which is kind of too bad. I mean, I'd love to be able to buy old vintage firearms in Africa and bring them back just for a collection to preserve them. I have actually seen in gunsmiths' offices fine old rifles. I believe I saw Martini Henry that had been built by Wesley Richards in South Africa once, being decommissioned. They cut the bolt in half and they filled the barrel with some kind of a epoxy compound. It was steel bed or something like that. And it was just going to be a display piece in a lodge or whatever. And I mean, I could tell the gunsmith was hurting over this as much as I was. In the US, that is a finely built British gun with a lot of collectible value. There weren't very many of them. And so it's a travesty that those countries have made it so hard to preserve some of that firearm history and heritage. But anyway, yeah, you can't just buy one over there and bring it home with you in your gun case. The customs office, when you check back in from an international trip, will just have you open your gun case and they'll examine it, check your serial numbers against what's called your 4457. And the 4473 is your paperwork you fill out at the gun store when you buy it. The 4457, assuming I have my numbers correct here, is just a form, generally about a half-page size, where you put your serial number, make, and model down, and the customs agent has signed it and stamped it. Usually you have to travel to an airport to find a customs office that'll do this for you. The big airports are very accustomed to doing it, but sometimes hold weird hours. They'll close the customs office when they're checking international travelers in, and then they open it back up again. It's worth calling ahead just to find out what their hours are, especially if you have to travel a few hours to get this done. Used to be that your 4457 was good for life once you had it made for a certain rifle. Anymore, they're yearly. So it's a bit of a pain, but if you travel with the same firearm on a yearly basis, you'll probably have to get a new one every year. And again, red tape. Domestic, easy. International, lots of hoops to jump through, but it's 100% doable. How about our next subcategory, which is a worry about damage to a fine firearm, something that you might be really partial to because it's a nice custom rifle built for you, or what about this? What if it's an heirloom of high value? Well, the smart thing really is to not fly with irreplaceable heirlooms. Now, I've flown with a lot of vintage firearms, and over time, a couple of them have become almost irreplaceable to the point now that I'm very careful about flying with them, but I'll still do it. Man, I'm in the business of using and writing about, informing people about firearms, and I can hardly afford to have a firearm that's so nice, I don't dare travel with it. But if you have something, let's say that, you inherited from your great-great-grandfather who rode with, Stonewall Jackson in the Civil War, by all means, leave that one home. Don't take absolutely irreplaceable heirlooms. Next, of course, is just to use a quality case, like we talked about, a good hard-sided case by a reputable maker. One thing that's worth paying attention to is that your latches have a security button in them. Until the last 5 or 10 years or so, latches just kind of had a tension latch on gun cases, and yeah, they did pop open sometimes in flight, especially if they took a hard knock. Anymore, all the cases are built with a little push-button latch inside the primary latch or to the side of the primary latch or whatnot that prevents it from just being popped open from a blow. I really like that. I also like a case with a lot of latches. Yeah, it's a pain when you go to open and shut it, but it does help hold that case more securely. And lest you think, they don't take hard knocks, it's funny because the airline themselves are very, very diligent about being responsible for your gun case. But airlines have individuals that work for them, and individuals sometimes are not careful and can even be the opposite. I have a friend that once stood in an airline terminal, watched gun cases coming off the plane he had just exited. They come down the conveyor belt to where the baggage train is waiting, to be loaded and brought to the carousels. And the attendant there that was taking bags from the conveyor belt, putting them on the baggage train, every time a gun case would come down, he would lift that gun case above his head, slam it to the tarmac, the asphalt beside him, then pick it up and put it on the baggage cart. Clearly had a thing against firearms and the people that own them. And he was doing what he could without being, obviously destructive to damage the firearms and probably the owner's experience, because that's likely to knock a scope off, right? But anyway, use a good case and lock it well with a lot of latches. Again, for those wondering, this one that I'm handling right here is a Pelican Storm case, model IM3410. Any of that Storm case line is going to be real good in whatever size you get. Next, when you pack it, put some air tags in that gun case. This is another trick that I learned from my friend Austin Brown, and it enables you, assuming you use an iPhone or an iPad, anything compatible that can track air tags, or maybe a product similar for Android if that's what you use. But put that little air tag, hide it in your gun case somewhere, and that way you can watch where your cases are, even while you're sitting on an airplane waiting to take off. Or if you disembark and they say, no, they never came in on that plane, well, you can check where they are. Maybe they're stuck at the previous airport waiting for the next flight or whatever. It also helps if somebody tries to steal your case and run off with it. You can track it down. And finally, insure your firearms if you're concerned about it. Now, I shouldn't admit this, but I just have whatever personal health and home insurance that I have on my firearms. But it's really a good idea to get traveler's insurance that will cover the cost, the replacement cost of your firearm. Okay, when you start packing, a lot of people are actually kind of unsure how to pack, and they don't realize the potential that is contained within one of these hard cases. Many people with a high-end firearm will use a hard case with the foam cut out to the profile of their rifle, and maybe they've got a little slot in that foam for their bipod and a couple boxes of ammunition. If they're a long-range shooter, they might have spaces for their Kestrel weather meter and so forth, right? I have done that, but I don't like doing that because it pretty well takes your rifle case and says it's for one thing. It's no longer a versatile traveling case. Far better, in my experience, is to take the foam out of your gun case. If it's got a little thin layer on the bottom, leave that in, that's fine. Sometimes I'll even just take one layer of foam out, leave a layer in the lid of the case and in the bottom of the case. But as those of you who are watching can see, in this case, I've taken all the foam out. Then I put my firearms in soft cases. I like a sleek case without a lot of big bulky padding in it. And I'll put those firearms in the soft case in the rifle case. So now they're padded, right? They're still going to be kind of loose in there. That provides room for things like hunting knives, bipods, tools, shooting sticks, anything that's not going to get damaged from a hard knock. I don't, for example, put in rangefinders because those have sensitive electronics in them. I prefer not to put in even a binocular or a spotting scope because, they're a optical instrument, right? I will, if I have to, I'll put a spotting scope in, but I typically put my binocular, which is usually a range-finding binocular, in my carry-on. Just take that with me. I protect it just like I would an expensive digital SLR camera. Then around all those tools, knives, bipods, firearms, and whatnot, I will pad pad all those guns with clothing. And here's one other tip. If you're traveling with a handgun, for example, when I go to Alaska, I take either a 44 Magnum compact revolver or my 10mm Kimber 1911. I will put that in the holster. That adds some protection, right? And then over the backside, I'll pull a warm beanie, like a thick wool beanie hat. And that's all the case I use to protect that. I'll stick it in a corner down at the barrel or whatever of my rifle where there's a little bit of room. I try and pack so everything's kind of evenly. And then on top of that, I will start adding padding such as socks, gloves, warm hats, additional, say you're traveling with a kid or something, jackets folded long ways, pants even. You can put a lot of clothing and equipment into a gun case, even with 2 firearms. Bring it right up to 49 pounds, right? 50 is the max, but when you put your locks on and stuff, you don't want to go too far over. And you can transfer a lot of gear in your gun case and keep those firearms perfectly padded and secure. I do put, like if I'm traveling with a rifle and a shotgun, or 2 rifles, say I'm taking a dangerous game rifle and a plains game rifle to Africa, I'll put them butt to barrel. So the butt stock of one down here, the butt stock of the other down here, and the way they're shaped, you can lay them in there so they just about fit like puzzle pieces. That really helps keep them from shifting and make it so that you can cleanly pad those firearms in there. Let's see. Just to demonstrate a few of the different types of cases I use, starting at the least protective, and I've only used these on shotguns a few times. You can do something like a gun sock, right? Silicone gun sock will help if you have to put it in, or if it gets wet, right? It'll help pull a little bit of moisture off that gun. This will pretty much only protect your firearm from significant scratches. It's not going to give it enough padding to protect it if your gun case takes a hard knock. Better is a gun sleeve, whether it's made out of canvas and leather, or kind of a fabric and neoprene liner. Holding one up right here for those of you that can see. That will pad your gun a little bit better than a sock, actually significantly better. And if you're struggling to get 2 firearms into a small case like this, you may consider putting a shotgun in a sleeve, or a slip, as some people call it, like this, and then your rifle in a good padded case. Now, I do like a really good padded case for a scoped rifle because it's important you protect that as well as possible. The traditional type, that's kind of shaped like, has an outline like a scoped rifle, works really well. They fit down in that gun case pretty nicely, and you can suck up the carrying strap to where it's flat if it has a carrying strap. That works really well for protecting your firearm and can serve once you get to where you're going as just a good carrying case. For example, if you're going on a boat-based hunt for blacktails on Kodiak Island, you'll probably leave your hard case in a storage facility at the docks or with the hotel, with your host, something like that, and just take the soft case. Likewise, on an African safari, you'll probably just take your firearm to the hunting truck in a soft case. You're not going to take your hard case every time. Finally, the type of soft case that I've gone to using more than any other right now is a fairly new model by Alps Outdoors, and it's a rubberized case that's actually pretty advanced. It's got a carrying strap, got a carry handle, it's got some compression straps, which is pretty cool, and it's waterproof and it floats. So if you're using this on a float plane based hunt or a boat based hunt where you're continually in and out of a Zodiac going to the shore to hunt bears or whatever, this is a fantastic choice. It'll keep your rifle dry in a downpour. It'll float it. Let's say it somehow slips overboard. It'll float. You can recover it. It's got a dry bag type top that you roll up, compress the air out, and then roll it up, clip it into place really well. And the cool thing is, this specific case fits perfectly inside this specific hard case that I'm using, this Pelican case. And yes, I can get 2 of them in there. I still lay the firearms inside like a puzzle piece, but once this case is rolled up, got the sealed top sealed off, it goes in wonderfully. Straps are a little bit annoying, hard to get in there, but you just unclip them, put them in your duffel, and it's fantastic. One other tip that I do is I like to put my initials on a gun case and my phone number. And if you're gonna like loan the firearm to a friend or something for a similar trip, this is what I've done here. You can just put a piece of tape over your phone number, like electrical tape or high-end like Gorilla tape level of duct tape, and then they can write their phone number on there. That way, if it gets misplaced by anybody from the airline to a guide, they can call you. Somebody, if it just ends up in the wrong spot, it's more likely you'll get it back without hassle. Okay, I think we are close to the final discussion here, which is what type of locks do I need and how do I prep this thing for traveling when I'm ready to go, right? So I've got my good gun case. I've got good internal soft cases to pack my firearm or firearms in. By the way, if you're traveling with a suppressor, no problem as long as it's short enough to fit in your case. Just leave it on, put it in the soft case, and pack that. That's how I've done all of mine in recent years. If your firearm is too long for the case with the suppressor mounted, just spin it off, stick it in the end of your case or whatever. It's just not a big deal. Pack it all really well. When you go to close it, I actually like my cases tight enough that I almost have to like kneel or stand on them to get the top all the way down to where it latches easily. Be aware that most of these have a water resistant seal all the way around, maybe even waterproof in the best ones. And if you have the tiniest bit of fabric or a strap from a gun case or anything like that protruding over that double edge seal with a rubber seal and like a hard edge in there, your case won't shut right there. You'll struggle to get it shut. So as you're finishing your internal packing, try and tuck any loose ends down around it, right? You can allow a little rise down the middle. Kneel on that sucker, it'll compress down. If it does, if a spot hangs up, look inside, make sure that that finger of your glove or whatever gets pushed back in there, and then put your weight on it, latch those latches shut. Okay. Next, you're going to put your combination locks on there. And just because you're going to open and shut it a couple times, probably as you're checking in, at least once, right, to put your signed declaration that it's unloaded inside, I generally will just spin off one number on my combination. And that way I can open it very quickly and easily when I get to the check-in counter. Once I've latched it again, I give all those dials a good spin, try and keep it unpredictable so you don't get some genius in baggage claim trying to quickly figure out your combination and extract something out of that case before they give it to you. Pretty rare to have a firearm stolen, but I do know people that have had things like bipods and hunting knives go missing. Those are sometimes, I think, lifted by an unethical handler, but also if you have a corner of your case pop open, it can allow hunting knife or bipod or something like that to fall out. So that's another reason I like a really secure case with a lot of latching points and locking points. We talked about getting colorful locks. Here's one other tip. Get spares. Travel with at least one spare, and 2 is better. This is for a couple reasons. If you lose one, you need another, right? And sometimes in some countries or locations, it can be hard to find another that's appropriate. That is really what you want to be dealing with. The other reason is sometimes that lock on its locking point can take such a blow that it will bend the yoke in the top of that lock and make it very hard to use. I've had that happen on so many occasions, I can't remember them. It's such a help to have a backup lock or 2 on hand, ready to go as soon as one of your locks become unusable. Finally, and this isn't required, but it can be helpful, I really like to put in a small handful of long, heavy-duty, automotive-level zip ties in your gun case. And this can be for several reasons. I mean, a zip tie of a certain color or whatever can serve as an anti-tampering device, right? If that's been cut off, somebody's been in your case. But also there are some airlines now, I think Delta's one, Delta's the main hub where I fly out of, that requires your gun case to be zip tied shut before they allow you to take it. So right there, when you're picking it up, you're walking to your truck, if your gun doesn't have a zip tie around it, they put one on it and cinch it shut. And then you walk out your truck and cut it off, right? But it can help. And I have had a couple cases traveling where I wasn't able to get a lock to work, and I wasn't able to get a new one where they let me get by with putting a heavy duty zip tie on one of those locking points. And it kind of saved my bacon. And folks, I think that's just about it as far as the dedicated discussion of how to travel with firearms. So in wrapping up, just a couple of comments, and then I do have a final thought for you. But the comments first. Driving, this is about traveling methods, right? Driving to a distant hunt is often still better than flying, particularly if you want to bring a lot of meat back or a great big rack like an elk rack, and particularly if you just want flexibility. Let's say you have 2 weeks off work, but you're done in 7 days and you're ready to go fishing somewhere else. You can drive a couple of states away and fish to your heart's content for another week, or you can go home if you got family waiting for you, and you won't incur ticket change fees like you do if you're flying, which can be quite costly at the last minute. So by flying, you're going to lose money, probably, but you'll save time. And in some cases, time is more valuable than money, especially for folks that are a little bit older and, like me, just have very limited time left anymore. As well, some destinations just aren't practical to drive to anymore, such as Alaska. I mean, unless you're a kid fresh out of high school or college and you're taking, what do they call that? It's not a leap year. Basically taking a year off. Yeah. And in that case, yeah, you may as well drive to Alaska, but everybody else probably going to need to fly. And hunting Alaska should be on every hunter's bucket list, so you're going to probably need to fly there. Let alone places like Europe or Africa. It used to be you could board a steamer and go to Africa, but pretty impractical anymore. So again, I've got a final thought coming up for you here in a minute, but let me just ask you a favor ahead of time. Just rate and review the podcast on whatever listening app you use, if you'd be so kind. It really helps make the show more visible to people that are just browsing potential podcasts to listen to, hunting podcasts, and helps us grow, which is crucial to our survival. Ask questions. Submit questions either on Instagram, which is just Backcountry Hunting Podcast, is the Instagram handle there, or through Patreon, which I talked about earlier. Patreon has a really nice messaging function that I prioritize. I try and answer messages that I receive there every couple days, or immediately if I can, if I have the time when they come in. And I've made some good friends through Patreon answering questions and whatnot there. So we'd love to have you join us there. Okay, how about a final thought? It behooves every hunter to be familiar with and confident about flying with guns. It's easy, all things considered, and it's our right. And it can open up some wonderful adventures that are otherwise logistically impractical. I'm Joseph von Benedict, and I'll see you in the backcountry, or maybe the airport.